welcome you all to the Art Education for Life speaker series. To begin with, I'd like to thank the Squamish and the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, whose ancestral and unceded land the Gordon Smith Gallery is located on. Art is a medium of engagement and dialogue. Through artwork and public programs such as these, we work to support the exploration of identity, relationship building, and untangling our complicated history on this land and the place we call Canada. I'd like to thank Artists for Kids, our partners in programming the Gordon Smith Gallery, and the educational arm of the organizations, as well as the O'Dane Foundation for their support of this speaker series, as well, and sponsors Polygon Homes and Anthem Properties. Additional support comes from the North Vancouver School District and the North Vancouver Recreation and Cultural Commission. Art Education for Life is a 5-part speaker series designed to serve as a nexus, gathering luminaries from various fields to illuminate the profound impact that art education has had on their journeys. This talk, Design Canada Then and Now, brings together design professionals Tyler Quarles and Greg Durrell to discuss Durrell's 2019 film, Design Canada, as well as how much has changed over the last 5 years since its release, and their respective paths in design, starting from an early love of art and creative expression. So it's fitting that the Gordon Smith Gallery is hosting this talk, because Gordon Smith himself belonged to a cohort of artists, designers, and architects for whom the disciplines between art and design were blurred, and whose work and aesthetic outlook were influenced as much by Bauhaus as Japanese printmaking and architecture, or Coast Salish iconography and Northwest Coast longhouse designs. So I want to go ahead and introduce our speakers. We have Greg Durrell, right here. He was born in 1983 in Toronto, Ontario. He's the owner of Tomorrow Creative Services, a Canadian design studio dedicated to creating impactful brands, products, and films for purpose-driven organizations. Durrell's design career began at age 16, and by 2001, he was designer and art director at War Child Canada, where he discovered his passion for using design to drive positive change. He played a pivotal role in the design team for the Vancouver 2010 Olympic Winter Games, and later co-led the award-winning rebrand of the Canadian Olympic team with Ben Hulse. Durrell's expertise extends to a deep understanding of Canadian design history, which he showcased in his 2018 documentary, Design Canada. The film, which explores the influence of European immigrant designers on Canada's identity in the 1960s, received international acclaim and debuted #1 on iTunes in the documentary category. In 2021, he led the rebrand of Mountain Equipment Company. Outside his professional work, Durrell enjoys spending time with his daughter in the Pacific Northwest. And Tyler Quarles is also one of our board members. We're very happy to have him here. He is a Montreal-born and Vancouver-raised design director, shaping brand identities and global campaigns since 2007. He's worked with renowned brands like Herschel Supply Co., Arc'teryx, TELUS, Patagonia, Lululemon, Met, Capita Snowboards, and many more. In 2015, he co-founded Barrow, a technical apparel brand dedicated to making life better in any weather. He would later go on to design the Canadian snowboard team's official uniform for the Beijing 2022 Olympic Winter Games. Tyler also is a former Artists for Kids student himself, and he was even awarded the Jack Shadbolt Artists for Kids Scholarship upon graduation. We still award that scholarship every year. Alongside Artists for Kids, we issue scholarships for students graduating from high school to pursue visual art and visual art education for their careers. And we're happy to be continuing that legacy and seeing it come full circle in this nice timeline. So I'm gonna cede the floor to Tyler and Greg, and please let's welcome them with a round of applause.
All right. Amazing. Well, hey everyone, I just wanted to say thank you so much again for everyone coming down tonight. It's amazing to see so many friendly faces and some new faces as well too. So thank you for being here. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be in this grand room, so thank you. What is also a big privilege is to have Greg here to speak about not only the film, but a life in design, and I can speak to that as well too. What's really special about what we're going to see here, and what we'll start to intro with learning more about how we both found design and what that means for youth, but also we're going to show some snippets of Greg's amazing film, and these moments within the film. If you haven't seen it already, absolutely please do. I love it. It's my like. We went to my mom and dad over here. We went to the show at the RIA, and we're both like, oh, this is amazing, just because we're such fans. So, what's so special about today, though, is that we get to go deeper into behind the scenes, and sort of like what led to the film. And I'm really excited to talk to you about that, which is going to be really cool. Because you've done so many Q&As post-film, but how deep can you really go? True. So this is fun.
I'm going to show some stuff.
Yeah, we're excited, and we're going to speak and project as much as we can. If anyone is, let us know if you can't hear us for whatever reason. So all good. Okay, so to dive in, I would like to start on a tangent. I feel I'll build trust if we start on a tangent, and I will prove that it goes back to design. Trust me, it will always go back to design. So, what do Brian Eno, Thurston Moore, the Cocteau Twins, and Nine Inch Nails all have in common? Well, they all feature the cover graphic design work of the amazing album cover designer Russell Mills. What does that mean to you?
So first off, do you see the size of the cue cards this guy has? I'm like so worried about what's to come. So first off, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. Question one.
Question one, right in.
So I became aware of design as a profession in 1995. It was through reading the liner notes of The Downward Spiral by Nine Inch Nails that had this really immersive packaging that folded out and had all these sleeves. And I clued in that was someone's job. I was 12 years old at the time when I saw that. So I'm taking your question and going on a tangent.
No, it's good, it's good. We're all about it.
We're going to hit the education part of that. And then, so for me, I kind of clued in. I was like, that's really kind of compelling. Now, a little bit about my backstory. My dad's an engineer. My mom has PhDs. My cousins are doctors. My grandfather was a lawyer. My other grandfather was an engineer. I don't fit in my family. They're from Toronto. I moved away. I ran as far away as I could. That's why I'm out here. But I wanted to pursue the arts. And it was actually my stepmom that acknowledged that this kid has a lot of creativity in him. You should apply for this art program. So I applied for this art program in high school, where half my day was spent learning traditional, the maths, the sciences, the Englishes, and the second half was in this technology lab that all the technology was sponsored by Apple. When Steve Jobs came back to Apple the second time, he donated all the technology to this high school in Toronto, and I was one of 20 kids that we did independent studies. So I was interested in design and websites at the time, coding HTML and Flash. We're probably the only two guys that remember.
I have so many questions. So many questions.
So then from that moment of discovering artwork through music and this high school art program, I was in the right place at the right time for the dot-com boom. And I just used my high school portfolio to apply for jobs, and I got hired in design studios. So I started working at the age of 16. I've never had another job, although Tyler might argue that, and we can talk about that later. Let's save that for later.
That's the after party.
Yeah, the after party. But yeah, so for me, that artist, opened doors of possibilities for me.
Okay, so many questions. You mentioned you had an aunt? Who
acknowledged it? It was a stepmom.
Stepmom.
Yeah,
so your stepmom, were you drawing at this time? Were you making collage work that was reminiscent of these album artworks that you're into? What is the catalyst for someone to say, I think this person has some potential, they can do this?
Yeah, so my dad, although he's an engineer, he's a photographer as well, and had documented my whole life. And one of the things that I obsessed over as a kid, I love playing sports. And I always wanted hockey jerseys and baseball jerseys, but my parents would never buy them for me, so I'd just make them myself.
Nice.
Legitimately.
Nice.
If the Canucks made the finals, I have this Vancouver Canucks one I drew. I was gonna post it, but I'll save that for next year.
From '94?
Oh yeah, from way back. I think it was even from before, maybe. So I was just always interested in logos. That when I look back in life, I was just always interested in logos. I was always drawing logos. The Expos logo, the Blue Jays logo that are part of this film, were always part of my life. So it was a lot of that, I think, just general creative output, and I was just always into art class as well. So.
Amazing. Okay, cool. And so, so just to reiterate, you find out about, because this whole story of going to this amazing school just still fascinates me. You've gone now to this amazing facility. You're still learning other things as well too. Like you're not just learning, coding and that kind of stuff. You're learning like social studies or English.
Yeah, that's like half my day, and then half the day is in the lab, and then we had to stay an extra hour after school as well in the lab.
Okay, got it. That's so interesting. That's amazing. What I find so fascinating about where this film ends up and the kind of work I think you're known for is it is such a departure aesthetically from what initially brought you to design.
Yes, absolutely. So when I was into design, at the same time, again, music was my intro. I was into Nirvana and Pearl Jam, the kind of grunge scene. And then one day there was a new student that joined my second year, and he brought a whole other set of influences. That was this one British design studio called the Designers Republic. But through that work, I actually discovered design that was made in the 60s. And in that moment, my whole visual world around me began to make sense. Should I hit the next slide?
Before you hit the next slide, I want to talk real quick about the Designers Republic. For anyone in the practice of graphic design, there are a few like cornerstone agencies. There's like Pushpin Studios in New York with Milton Glaser and Seymour Swash. There's Pentagram. There's a couple of really legacy, Total Design. There's some legacy people some people that are and some people that are not discussed in the film. And for the, what would you say, early 90s through to maybe early aughts, the Design Republic represented a visual zeitgeist of what graphic design was. Like that was what we were all trying to do, and these people became like peers or mentors of yours.
Yeah, so I would describe it as maximum minimalism was like their work in a way. And as you know, in the late 90s, like the internet used to be a super friendly place, and you could like email anyone and they'd normally get back to you, and so yeah, I was just at the right place at the right time. I had the right passion, and was able to find some really great mentors early on that shared their approach to design, their philosophy, and from that, I understood the importance of understanding design history in order to know the future.
And so where did that design history lead you?
It led me here, and really growing up in Canada, and then when I began to understand aesthetics and approach to design beyond just like mashing things up on a page and getting all grungy, these visual world, these symbols that I grew up with, that I was obsessed with as a kid, always trying to draw, I just gravitated to it. I wanted to learn more because what I find so powerful about these symbols is that they're so simple, but they can also communicate so much at the same time. So this was something that had always stuck with me. I also felt that there was this amazing Canadian legacy there. However, I could not find any information about any of these symbols, how they were made, who made them. Canadian design was never anthologized the same way the American story was, or the British, or the Dutch. And it just bothered me my whole life until one day I was like, I'm just gonna make a film about it. How hard can this be?
Like, just for context, I went to Cap College for graphic design, and this is the section on American graphic design. We don't learn about this stuff. So were you learning this at school? Like,
no, you couldn't, but it was just growing up. I just knew it. Like, I watched cartoons from the NFB. I saw the CBC logo radiate on national television. I saw the CN train cars go by me all the time, I think one of the pivotal moments for me was the one in the second lower left corner, the Montreal Olympics, because again, I had this passion for sports, and then I saw that sports and design could overlap and be one, and that's when I knew this is really what I want to do.
Amazing. Fast forward, I'm a colors and shapes person, so how many years in math is that? But
from that?
From to 2010?
Yeah.
To be a part of 20, that's a pretty special moment.
Totally, yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so now you've that there's something to be discovered here. There's a further opportunity to speak more on where this came from. What's kind of leading through your head as you're thinking of that?
Yeah, so I think of all these symbols, and the one that really kind of put Canada on the map was Canadian National Railways. And so that's always been considered one of the greatest logos of all time. Like it still is today.
Truly, yeah. Yeah.
You know, like whenever design blogs do the thing, like it's always in the top 10. It's always up there. And again, there was nothing really about it. So my curiosity.
Globally.
Globally, like not even in Canada. So I really wanted to discover like what the backstory was. I'd heard some rumors that it was like sketched on a napkin, you know, but I wanted to know what the answer was.
So I think the first clip you have prepared is the special CN section from your film, and yeah, let's enjoy.
Yeah, and so the one thing I'll say before I play the CN segment was that I think this is the logo that started the Canada that we know today. What happens in the late 50s, CN had invested in modernizing the railway, but they were kind of seen as this old and dusty brand. And they used design to modernize and tell a story. And I firmly believe, you know, the flag that we have today comes 5 years after CN. All these logos come after CN, and I don't think we have any of them without this one, without CN Railway adapting it. So with that said, we'll go into the first segment.
Love it.
We were back in 1959. Canadian National was concerned about the logo that we were using, Maple Leaf logo, and felt that it didn't match the kind of progress that CN was making in its identity and image. The research came back saying that the public felt, as we suspected, that we were old-fashioned, anachronistic, and all of these things conspired to prove that we needed some serious upgrading. Canada was in its infancy. There was a lot of graphic design around, but not much in the way of corporate identity experience. We went to our ad agencies in New York, and they said, New York is where it's at. We'll put you in touch with some people. We found James Volkas, who ran his own little firm, James Volkas Inc. He was a young, talented designer. Well, he was blunt, and he said, you don't want a logo. What you want is a corporate identity program.
And I said, well, you need sort of a more comprehensive thing instead of a sort of drive-by design job, because this is pretty complex. And so we got to talk more about design and CN. And after a while, he said, would you be interested in doing it yourself, but you would have to open an office in Montreal to service the client? And I said, sure, why not? What a big break.
He worked for several months on trains and trucks and all these other things without having a logo to work with.
I went to Toronto, and I met Alan Fleming, and I said, I think you could help out a lot on this. And so then we started doing design sketches.
Alan came in one day and said, I got a wonderful project. I get to do a new logo for CN. Oh, we said, oh, this is terrific.
My sketches of the CN, and it was a flowing CN. You know, I said, just so it's something that makes motion of some sort. And Alan sent back a lot of, sketches, but they were too fluid. They didn't look corporate enough to me.
So he laid out what he was doing. And I said, there's nothing there that you're going to sell. Oh, he said, yeah, this one's pretty good. Nah, we said, that's not really good. He said, don't worry about it, I'm going to sell this one. It was really not very good. It was okay, it was ordinary, but there wasn't really a winner there.
I think it was James who initiated this, said, why don't you just try putting together the letters this way as a squarish C, curved corners, and then join it up to the end and continue the same kind of corners and see what you get.
I was on the plane, instead of having a scotch, he loves scotch, and he said, I realized I had missed it. So he said, I drew this on the napkin. When I got to the hotel, I got a piece of paper and I drew it, tightened it up. And he said, I didn't show them the other ones at all, I just took in this one.
It's a single thickness line, which means it doesn't age. It symbolizes the movement of men, materials, and messages from one point to another. The symbol carried its own authority. It spoke for itself. It demanded space around it. It resisted embellishment. It just said what was intended to be said. Leave it there. immediate sensation with the media in this country. It was front page.
I think a lot of the appeal of it was that people could see a train track. They could read it as an illustration. They could pretend that it also was a picture of something.
My mother's neighbors liked it, and they don't know anything about design.
This is so good. I will draw it. I will show you something. I'll tell you why I like it. Here we have, to do C and N. Doesn't do anything. Maybe I should take a typeface like that. It doesn't do anything, it doesn't do anything, it doesn't do anything. So he gets this intuition. Oh, I begin to see a train going this direction. You see? Now it's arriving. Now, what is interesting, he took this dimension and he made it similar to this dimension. See, this now makes this fantastic symbol understandable to anyone. This is why I love it.
It was like the Emancipation Proclamation or something. Now it looks sort of retro, hip, cool. But at the time, it was like, ooh, like sizzling. It was so fresh and bold. All that stuff was coming out of the Mad Men era of design.
I grew up in Toronto, so the CN Tower was a really big thing to me, and I grew up in a neighborhood where the trains rolled through, so the CN logo wasn't that it was important to me by any means, but I just knew what the C stood for. It's not lost on me, the fact that this is the country that was built by the railroad.
It made Canada, wow, that must be an incredible place.
Can I add something on top of that while we, oops, sorry. So I made this film for 6 years, and I was so close to it. I could recite every line, I could tell you every cut, and I've just literally not, when it came out, I didn't even know if it was good, to be honest. I was so close to it. But watching this now, Massimo Vignelli, the guy who draws it, for anyone that doesn't know, he's the godfather of modernism, right? He's American, and again, I had grown up with I don't want to say a designer inferiority complex, but again, no one told our story. The American story is out there. Vignelli, Saul Bass, Paul Rand, and
all New York.
All New York. And I emailed him one day, just cold out of the blue when I was starting. Like I don't even think I had filmed anything yet. I think I was just I was pretending to be a filmmaker. I was just emailing people, be like, "Hey, I'm a filmmaker. I'm thinking about making a film." I kind of lied, and I emailed him and was like, "Hey, think about making this film about Canadian design. I'm just kind of curious from your perspective, what was the work like?" And he emailed me back right away, and he said, Canada was the Switzerland of North America. Switzerland was the heart of modernist international style design. And he told me, if you ever come to New York, let me know, and I'll sit down and do an interview. And he sat with me for 3 hours that day, and I just sort of pulled out logos. Like I had them printed, and he was like, "Give me that piece of paper." And he just started sketching it, like I was barely.
Where is that piece of paper?
I was barely, you know what? I didn't even bring it. I know, like I was so rookie at it at the time, but I'm pretty sure that was the last interview he ever did, too. That would have been one of his last interviews before he passed away.
I'm so glad you brought up Massimo. So there's, we talked about New York. Just to give context to what this gentleman was a part of, there's two things you think of when you think of New York. There's the pieces of graphic design. There's an I Love New York shirt, right? We all have one or have had one in some part of life. And then there's the subway system. He did the subway system. So that world of that infographics and how we make a very complex thing simple and efficient, just like the actual function of the thing is, that was all him. So that's when we say he's brilliant in what we do. And on the topic of making complex things simple, I think he illustrated something so perfect, which was, there's a reason if you go back into any high school textbook or whatever, they're going to be adorned with people's favorite bands logos and whatever it is, and any logo that you can draw in an HB pencil on a textbook is a brilliant logo. And he did it right there on a napkin, done and done. So there you go. Okay, so backing up a little bit. Okay, so that what we just saw there was finished product, part of the film. Yeah. You didn't start like that though.
No.
You started from a very different place.
Yes. So
where like so many questions, Greg. So like where do you start and how do you say, okay, I'd like to do this thing? How does that come out?
Yes. So again, I'm kind of like a student of the game, right? I want to know the history. I want to understand the history, and probably the most famous Canadian designer of that time is Burton Kramer. He did the original CBC logo. And so I knew who he was. He was out there. He wrote in a lot of journals, but he had been retired for many years. And I found, I think through the internet, that he had become an artist and was doing this art show. And I was like, okay, cool. So one of my friends, like growing up, were like, all right, we're gonna go. I don't know, I was pretty young at the time, like in my early 20s, I think. We're like, all right, we're gonna go, but we're too cool to go on time. We're like gonna go at the end. And we walk in and they're shutting the show down and it's just him and his wife. And we're like, oh my God, like, is that him? Because like, you know, this was like early internet. Like there's no photos.
He doesn't have an Instagram account.
No website, no Instagram. No. So we're like, Mr. Kramer, and you know, we just talked about how much like we admired his work, and that opened up. Again, he almost became another mentor. He invited me to his studio, and we went through his work. Like I'd never seen any of the work before, and that's just started a relationship. I made his life retrospective book that we put together. That was 50 years of his design history. And then I moved out here to work for the Olympic Games. And I was working at the Olympic Games, which was like a pretty monumental experience in terms of the Canadian identity. And coming out of that, I wanted to do something else. And this whole thing of design and history was on my mind because I was thinking about Burton, and I knew that it was the last chance to do a lot of these interviews, to capture these people. So this is when I started, I think, faking that I was a filmmaker. So I told Burton that, I really want to make a documentary film. Don't worry, I got a team, I got all this thing. I didn't. I didn't even know how to use a camera. I actually just borrowed one of my buddies. And he was kind enough to be like, all right, like, let's do this. And we built a relationship from there. Can I show
yes.
the next slide?
So this is like behind the scenes.
Yeah, this is like, it went so terribly. Like nothing I shot was usable, okay? Like watch this stuff. Like I thought I could handhold the camera, it's all shaky. The focus isn't even working. Like we're going through these manuals, like it was horrific what I did.
But I think what you're illustrating though is like, there's always there's like the old thing of like fake it till you make it, but like, I think there's a big statement in fake it till you become it.
Yes, I agree. I'm totally with that. And so as much as I like messed up all of the picture, I was able to kind of tap into his soul a little bit, and I didn't mess up the audio. And I was able to capture this one clip of him that was like, all right, I think there's something here. So this is overlaid with footage I obviously shot later. But this was a kind of inception moment of like, okay, I think this could maybe be a film.
Design is not just something you do on a piece of paper. Design is how you think, how you see, how you act, what you buy, what you surround yourself with, what you listen to, what you don't listen to. So design for me is a kind of way of life and a substitute for any other kind of religion.
So I obviously got a little better with the cameras, you know, over the years, but it was his passion and conviction that made me think, all right, I think this could maybe be a film.
I love that. I love that so much. And so that was your first interview. That was everything first. You had a relationship with him, and like you're recording this. Like clearly that was a moment where you knew, okay, great. There is a continued story to tell here because I can capture wonderful sound bites, and you know, like everything you just saw in his space is beautiful. I would frame that and just put it all over the walls. I love it. I imagine, not getting a little bit off a little quick tangent, but I'm imagining if you're at the same time, I'm just trying to think of the time here. Yeah. You're also working on the 2010 Olympic Games, right?
No, I'd finished the Olympic Games. We were working on the Team Canada.
That's right.
Identity. Yeah,
so I'm
so
imagining.
I was working as a designer. So I was working as a designer to fund traveling and buying the gear and doing all that kind of stuff.
Right. Okay. Okay. So it's totally self-funded at this point. You're just making it happen and going from there day in, day out. I can imagine though, in these little moments that are just you and Bert and Kramer, like you're having these moments that I'm sure you're bringing into your work in that time, and like. I think that like this topic of mentorship kind of keeps coming up. Like you got a front row seat to all these amazing icons and these little side of camera notes and in their homes and life, and like how did that change the way you worked in your practice?
I think it I mean my heart was already with the movement and the philosophy, but it was just I felt like I was on the right path of life, maybe. Okay. You know?
Right.
And also getting the firsthand glimpse of like seeing all that work that no one else had seen before.
Right.
So if anything, it just sort of raised the bar in terms of the importance of getting this story out there. But again, I was like, we're now so early on in the process. That was like 2011, 2012.
Okay.
So I still had no idea what I was doing or where this was going to go. I just naively thought, oh, this is going to be easy. I don't know, it'll take me a year and I'll be done, kind of thing. But when I was reaching out to designers, and the thing was, I had to look them up in the phone book. You know, like a lot of them didn't have, they don't have websites.
That was my next question. How on earth do you find these people? How do you find, that's the thing about graphic design. There's no caption, there's no placard, there's no credit.
Yes.
Unless you're looking at award-winning work featured in a communication arts or something of that era of a publication. How do you find these people who did this amazing work?
So there was a magazine in the 70s. It was called Idea Magazine. I don't think it's around anymore. Anyway, it's from Japan. They actually anthologized Canadian design 1975 or something. That was the biggest textbook of design, and through that I could find some credits.
Wow.
And so I remember just one was like Rolf Harder. So I just went to the phone book. I was like, all right, I'm just going to call all the Harders till I get the right one. And then, I don't know, I think it was like maybe the fourth or fifth I did. And again, I told them as a filmmaker, stretch the truth. But when everyone was so receptive and invited me into their homes and shared their passion, that again, it just was this thing inside of me that I needed to do.
Amazing, amazing. I think we have a couple more behind the scenes things to look at.
Yeah, so how I made it, like, you know, a lot of people are kind of curious about that. So like, this is literally my gear bag. I was a one-man operation for about 3 years on this project. I bought 2 DSLR cameras. I had a boom mic, a lav mic, a couple tripods, and that was it. So I would be sitting here trying to ask the questions, operate 2 cameras that turned off every 10 minutes, otherwise the batteries would overheat and then they would die. Meanwhile, like monitoring the boom mic and then the lav mic in my ear and trying to ask the questions. It was a little bit of chaos, but and listen, I made a lot of mistakes along the way. Camera's not on, sound thing's not on, but my passion and curiosity for the subject matter, I think, was what allowed it to kind of continue and be successful.
Awesome.
But
awesome.
It did truly take me 6 years, and should I show the clip? You know, like, if you don't believe me, like, you're gonna watch me age.
Look at this baby.
Over these 6 years, all right? Like, I don't even have a beard. Look at, like, oh, it's so much. I get a beard at the end, but these are just moments, rolling the cameras behind it. Now I'm in the beard days in here, but the beard shape there, oh man, I look back at that, I was like, I don't know what it's doing. It took me a while to figure out how to shape a beard too. That's another story. We could talk about that in the aftermath.
Well, we talked earlier and I said that fashions change, but the work is timeless. So thank you for encapsulating that. And it's not easy being on front of the camera, so.
Those were accidents. I didn't mean to be there. I just found those like later. I was like, oh man, but knew that would make a funny clip. So
this is kind of fast forwarding to when you and I actually first connected and first met.
Yeah.
And I was working from my perspective, I'm working at an ad agency, and we would often have people coming through. We'd discuss fun things just like this, but at the ad agency we had a coffee shop in front, and I had seen somewhere online, I had seen your preview or your trailer of the Burton Kramer interview, which is just fantastic and just makes you you're already a designer, but you just want to do that for the rest of your life. It's so insightful and exciting. If you haven't seen the film, you've got to see it. And then we meet, and what was going on in your life? You're like, there's no film yet.
So I'm still faking it at that point. Like I made a trailer for like a film that like I didn't even have. You know what I mean? It was just like, all right, this I put that out, and it did really well. Like it wasn't crazy. I think it did like 50,000 views in the first couple weeks. But this wasn't my job. I still didn't know what I was doing, and I was working as a designer. That's like what I was doing. And at that time, right around when I met you, maybe like right before, I had been invited to down to Cupertino to interview at Apple. And I went down there and interviewed for like a full day, and they told me to bring work that you were passionate about. So I obviously—
Keeping in mind, your school you went to was basically an Apple school. Like this is like
Mecca. So I had kind of come like full circle, and of course like this, I mean, I use the products like every day. They're that gold standard of everything, and I felt my whole life I've been leading up to that moment. And so I went down, I brought the Olympic work, I brought some Team Canada work, and I brought just like some rough cuts of like this thing, because they told me like, what are you passionate about? Let's see it. And I was interested in film and photography a bit. And I went through this whole day. There was like 13 interviews, and I got to the last interview, and his name was Alan Dye. So Alan Dye is now taking over for Johnny Ive, who is like the #1 design lead. He's now in that seat. And at the end of this like huge long day, he's like, look, like, we'll give you a job, but we all think you should finish that film you're working on. And I was just like, no. And I was like, oh man. And like, he was right. Like, again, it was like, I needed to do it. So yeah, I declined and just went into the deep end of this journey now of making this film. But now like table stakes are really high, right? Like I put in a couple of years, I've like invested a whole bunch of money into the gear, I traveled, I paid my own dime. Now I need this thing to kind of come out, and I seeked out mentors. So I don't know if anyone's seen the film Helvetica in here. Okay, seems like a bunch. So Helvetica is like a documentary film just about the font Helvetica that to me was made by Gary Hustwit. And it made design so accessible, like my mom could watch it and understand what it was about. So I reached out to Gary and his partner, Jess. And
again, more examples of reaching out to people and saying, I have a question, can we work on something?
Absolutely. Like my whole life is fearless. Like I'm not afraid of anything, of asking a question or doing anything. Like what's the worst can happen? Someone says no, you know? So I'd reach out to them and just shared, again, my like really, really rough cuts, and they were into the idea. And they were like, this is gonna be so easy. So at the time too, this is 2013, and I'd also acknowledged like the 150th anniversary of Canada was coming up. So I'm like, perfect time like to anthologize, look back at our visual history. And now I have like these heavyweights in my corner, executive producer and producer. And we were rejected by everyone, like Telefilm, NFB, CBC, Bell Media Fund. Everyone said no. Everyone told me, well, because this is a design project and not art, you don't qualify for art funding. That's what I was kind of told. Oh, is this, legend right here. Oh yeah, let's do it.
Legendary.
Thank you. So even with their experience, like we couldn't fund it. And I was still just like hustling side jobs as designers to pay for the film. I'll keep going as you pull it up. Now, it does get real, and to finish a movie, like you need money. Like you need money. And like you saw the CN clip, like I pulled so much archival, like that, some of that stuff you can kind of write off for fair use, but a lot of that stuff you have to license. So what we ended up doing was we ran a Kickstarter, and this was a screenshot of when we hit the 80K that we put for. We ended up raising 100K US, so it was about 130 at the time. But what this did was, for the 4 years up to this moment, it was just the thing I was doing on the side. The stakes were low. Nobody knew about it, like barely anyone. Like you knew about it, but I didn't tell anyone about it because I didn't want that pressure. But now I have like 1,400 people I'm accounted for. Like there was amazing support. And I had money for the first time. So I now had a crew. You know what I mean? This is me just standing in the back. I'm not even doing anything now, right? I got a sound guy.
It's totally in focus there.
And it's totally in focus. Yeah, you know what I mean? I had someone else taking the photo. Like I thought I was living the dream. And I went down a wrong path of this was what we thought we wanted to do was show how design was made. So we followed this amazing studio in Toronto, Concrete. We're with them right now during the course of them rebranding this company, and literally spent all the money on that editor. The editor cost so much, and then we get to August 2017.
Right.
Should I just keep running?
Keep running.
All right, I'll just keep running.
Great.
So we get to August 2017 now. This film was supposed to come out in October, and Gary and Jess is she's Canadian, but they live in New York, and we're down in New York. We finished the film. We're like feeling so good about it, and we go to do a test screening. And Jess invited a whole bunch of really accomplished documentary film editors to check out this film. And they checked it out, and right away, the first comment was, I don't think you have a feature film here. They're like, maybe you have some like little online clips, but we don't think you just don't have it. The story's not there. And I was so like gutted and freaking out. And I was actually almost thinking like, I'm so screwed. Like, you know what I mean? I took all these people's money, and how am I ever going to work in this profession ever again, right? It's like my colleagues and bosses and all these people that donated. And then the second day,
I would have still gone for beers with you.
but you would have been like, "Where's my movie, man?" Like, you know what I mean? I would have heard that my whole life. And then the second day, we did a second screening with two of my really good friends that were in New York that were designers, and they said something. So they said the same thing. There was like no holds barred. They said, you know, I think you have to cut out all the present day because it felt almost like a commercial in a way. Versus, I can tell you right now, there was one comment. My friend Alex Shuka says to me in a segment of The Flag that we're not going to share today, but there's these clips of the news of people talking about like Canada shouldn't have a flag. Some people thought they should. And he's like, I've never heard someone in Canada from 1960s speak before. It's like, that's your angle. And what I acknowledged at that time was that I was no longer making a film about logos. These logos were a window into Canadian history. However, I spent all the money and I didn't know what to do. Meanwhile, at this time was really when the Time's Up and the Me Too movement was like really bubbling up. And online, I don't know if you could see this, but this was just from our Instagram account, just like in process, photograph like some of the designers, and somebody just writes, that's a pretty white male cast there. Hope there's at least some ladies getting reasonable screen time too. And here's the thing, I mean, I was making a film about logos from 1960s Canada. Like design started at a very almost industrial like profession. You know, I wish there was a woman behind the CN logo, but I couldn't do that. However, that was a comment that was like very much now in my face, and other people would write stuff like, looks like a great project. Can you tell me how many of the designs and designers you profile are minorities or indigenous? So I've now hit this wall, and they're right. Don't get me wrong. Like, they're absolutely right. And I'm also acknowledging that if I don't address this, no one's ever going to see the film, or it might never come out.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so
I got the summer slide. I'll run through this lesson. Okay,
yeah,
so
for sure.
5 years in at this point, all right? So I've invested 5 years of my time and money into this thing. I was rejected from all the Canadian broadcasters. I'd raised money on Kickstarter that I'd spent. I'm now accountable to 1,400 people. Film editors would tell me there's no story, and I have no money.
Yeah.
And actually, who ends up saving the day? This isn't a plug. It was TELUS and Shopify. that came through. TELUS had seen the Kickstarter and we're like, hey, do you need any support? I was like, nah, man, I'm good. I got this. Like, we got a plan. Same with Shopify. They're like, hey, if you need anything, let me know. And then at this point, I was like, oh man. So I was like, hey guys, like, remember me? And I told them about where I was at, but I also had a path to finish it. So one of my ideas was, out of sheer frustration, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna put the film critics in the film. So one of the opening scenes, and again, thinking bigger than design, I talked about the Canadian immigration policy. So you saw George Stroumboulopoulos from Much Music back in the day. Hannah Sung was another VJ from those days that I interviewed her about Canada's immigration policy. So here's a 1-minute clip that kind of sets that part of the film up.
While Canada is a nation founded on immigration, there was only a certain kind of immigrant that Canada really wanted before the late 60s. And not to put too fine a point on it, but Canada was interested in white immigrants. This is not in any way to negate the multitude, the hundreds of First Nations that exist, but what we know is Canada, politically speaking. It wasn't a multicultural society.
My Canada was always an immigrant Canada. And I'm not discounting what happened to Indigenous populations. That was colonization. But the next wave of immigration, people from all over the world. I think half the time art comes from elsewhere.
European designers coming to Canada is largely the product of just economic necessity. These people just happen to be extraordinarily well trained in very specific skills, typographic skills, and with a very modernist conception and idea of clarity and order that Canada definitely benefited from.
And the thing was, that worked. Like, I never got one comment about it of setting that context up beyond after that, which.
And when you watch the film, you'll see that there are more varied voices and stories told, which is really poignant. And I just want to just make a quick note while we're here too to also just mention that there's also like an opportunity here we have as a foundation, as a curriculum, and as art education, specifically within graphic design, which will be our angle. But I think that it's increasingly better and more diverse now, and we have a lot of room to grow. And Absolutely. We're really excited for the next 2, 5, 10, 20 years.
Yeah,
sure.
and kind of jamming off that, the end of the film really sets up that this was the first 50 years, the next 50 years
right.
are kind of up to you. And we spent time in the Shopify design team, like looking at their teams and stuff like that. So you'll see that we set the context for where we were, but that doesn't have to be our future. That
right.
we'll maybe talk at the
Before you kick off this next section of Women in Design, I thought I'd bring this again. This is my actual textbook from school. And there are 6 tabs here, and these represent where a woman's name was credited in any design in any of this. So there's 400 pages here, and that means that there's 6 that discuss women in design.
Yeah, and it's not to say they didn't exist, I would say.
This is the story that this particular publisher, No Shots Fired, like that's the story that is told. This is getting close to 20 years ago now. But I hope it's better now. I haven't checked. This is 3rd edition. I'm hoping that we're on the 9th edition, which is better. But.
Yeah, I don't even know. I think there are more editions, but
I would hope.
But
so.
to be said, but
let's make one.
So coming out of that, and again, this gift of life that Shopify and TELUS gave me, I knew exactly what I needed to do for the woman angle, because there was a legendary woman designer from the 60s and 70s. Now the thing is, her work was completely opposite. Like, I was focusing on modernism, clarity, and order, and she's elaborate and ornamental and detailed that I wasn't originally trying to do. But what she does is create this incredible counterpoint to everything you've heard in the film before. She actually has the longest segment in the whole film. So.
And before you click it off,
yes.
Her logo was on that first grid of logos we saw, and it still fit. So as much as it was she comes from a different zeitgeist, it still is Canadian design in all ways.
Yeah, and it's probably as Canadian as the flag, if not even more.
When I first started, there was very, very few women, and I only know of one. It was Heather Cooper who paved the way for young female designers like me to actually even consider design as a way to make a living.
We went on a little class tour from high school. It was a studio tour, and they said that they would never hire women ever because they have to work late at night and it's dangerous. But anyway, that did not happen. They did not get rid of the women.
So, and I had tried to get Heather Cooper originally, but as you saw, like, she lives in the forest in the middle of nowhere. She wouldn't answer an email or anything. I had to literally call her house, like, I think it was like 20 times until she finally picked up the phone. I explained what I was doing, and then we showed up, and she has like a Band-Aid on her forehead and stuff, and it's just like, let's go. And we're just like, okay, can we maybe remove it? She's like, no, I cut myself. We're like, all right. But again, she just provided such an amazing attitude and I think role model for women designers, as well as Didi Katona from Concrete talked about. So what was at first so frustrating to get notes on was I think turned into something so positive, and I'm grateful that people wrote some of those messages.
Amazing. And you had a similar experience as well too.
Yeah,
you're up against the timeline. You're trying to
finish this thing.
Yeah.
And then so the other aspect was the Indigenous design. Like, what is that story now too? And again, like I'm starting with logos now. I'm trying to cover all these bases. And I was really struggling with this one because I didn't want it to be just tokenism. Like, hey, let's just throw in a story. And there's a big segment of the film that's about Expo 67 that you'll see a little clip of later. And I was struggling with one day, and one of the subjects from that section of the film was curated at the Museum of Civilization. And I was talking to him one day, and he said to me, well, why don't you just do the Indians of Canada Pavilion? And I was like, no, I'm not talking about Indians, like Native Americans. And he's like, no, like, you know, the old way that used to be referred to. And what was so incredible about this story is that, so at Expo 67, the Canadian government had donated a building to Indigenous artists and let them tell their own story. And this was the first time that the general population became aware of the struggles of Indigenous people. You'll hear John Moses speak about it in a second. This was really ground zero of what is today reconciliation.
Expo 67 had a really important pavilion called the Indians of Canada Pavilion. This was the first time that Aboriginal peoples had a direct voice in their representation at an international World's Fair.
The Indians of Canada Pavilion at Montreal's Expo 67, it was one of the first opportunities during the latter half of the 20th century where Indigenous people are given a political voice and a separate, standalone, for want of a better term, safe space within which to express themselves, not just to Canada, but to people from around the world. In 1967, it's within 25 years of the end of the Second World War. Post-war liberal democratic states around the world at this point are still struggling with this notion of how do we accommodate the interests and the aspirations of our respective Indigenous populations or national ethnic minorities. The role that the government of Canada was going to set for itself. They could educate the rest of the world about the perceived success of their Indigenous policy in Canada, which frankly was still founded upon this notion, ultimately, of assimilation. The Indigenous artists of that era were quite forthright in saying, we're having none of that. We will not be presented as propaganda on behalf of the Canadian government. We need a separate space within which to tell the people of the world our own story. Everything that we're doing right now in terms of Indigenous representation, the Indians of Canada Pavilion was ground zero for all of that. I think as we look back at it, there was a cross-pollination that was taking place between contemporary Indigenous art of that era and what was unfolding within Canadian design of that era as well. And it's important to note that people Like George Cloutessy, for example, who was one of the specially commissioned artists, had worked previously as a graphic designer and a book illustrator. These connections are there.
Amazing. Awesome. Super eye-opening.
Yeah, and you know, I think my takeaway from that is so easy when you get notes or feedback that you don't like. It's so easy to just dismiss it versus embrace it sometimes. You know, as designers, like I'm sure you deal with
it's just
it, right?
It's a part of the process. Like it's the breakdown to be built back up. And when you realize that it's the sum that is greater than the parts, because of the people involved, it always goes back to the people and those stories. Very cool. We are running short on time, but I do want to make mention that the score of this film is brilliant. It's lovely, and I think
we could also just do the score part.
Sure,
and
sure.
then
Sounds good.
open
Sounds
up
good.
to the end.
Yeah, totally. I like it. Let's do that. Yeah. Done.
So you want to intro your so Tyler rewatched the film last night, and what was the first thing you told me today?
Oh, that just like every time that I could tell you the text. It just says like every time I watch it, it's just so good and poignant, and there are so many moments in the score where I think that it reflects the work in a timeless nature, but is also so modern and exciting too. So it's the combination of when you have something that is in its communication so simple, but also utilizing future-focused mediums to communicate that, which I love.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, a film is like it's a greater whole. It's not just me. Like so many people contribute to this. 3 people wrote an original score for this film: Ben Hulse, Mark Lazeski, and Mike Rocha. So Mike Rocha was someone I went to elementary school with. He was a classically trained pianist. And I knew he was into the arts, and he actually wrote the score for that very first Burton Kramer one. And so there's 2 types of music that you hear in the film. One is like this classical piano that is really almost reminiscent of the creative process. And here's a short clip of Mike talking about how he wrote music for those segments.
There was one thing that always stuck with me, it might have even been in one of the earliest clips that I saw, which was him saying, good design is like what it is, what it isn't, you know, and always this like yin and yang of like positive and negative. So I think when I started to think about like what music would be, I sat down at the piano. You know, I was playing without metronomes and without this like locked rigidity of a clicking tempo, where everything was what you call like tempo rubato, which means it just always flexes depending on what it feels like it needs to be. And I would just kind of watch and do lots of different takes. And always this improvised sort of feel and trying to keep it minimal and just do the minimum amount.
So we had that style of music to kind of be reminiscent of the creative process. And then the second style was, you know, the work that was happening in the 60s was futuristic. It was leading edge. And what was the equivalent of that time in music? And that was a synthesizer. So then we really lean into the synthesizer. And here's one short clip about the Expo, but there were just some absolute banging synth tracks in this that were by Mark Lazeski and Ben Hulse. So here's one by Mark for Expo.
Expo 67 was critical in showcasing to the world Canadian foresight and innovation. Buckminster Fuller's Dome, Habitat 67 by Moshe Safdie. I mean, these are very forward-looking architectural proposals. They are as radical today as they were in 1967, and that's saying a lot.
To be on that train would mind melting. It's incredible. 1967. Nutty. It's crazy. It's amazing. Well, a perfect segue to be talking about, and I know we're getting tight on time here, if not already over, but you know, the topic of today's discussion is about designing Canada then and now. We've looked at then. We understand where things came from. Please watch the film. It dives in deep, speaking of on more clarity and whatnot. But also we have a responsibility to think about where we've been, like looking backwards roughly 50 years, and where are we going 50 years from now? We have so many wonderful opportunities to learn from the past and also carry these ideals into us and to our next 50. I get so excited to kind of continue to think about Canadian design. What does it mean to be Canadian? What does it mean to, like, what does Canada look like? And obviously we have had some wonderful instances in the looking back of where that goes, and looking forward, it's the age-old question: what does a Canadian organization or identity system or logo or color look like? You know, and these are the things we deal with every day for both Canadian and non-Canadian brands. But you've probably been asked this question a million times. What do you say?
This question always questions me because I don't know, you know, like everyone asks me, what is Canadian design? I don't know. Like, to me, design is, it's a problem solving, right? It's a combination of analytical and critical thinking mixed with a little bit of magic that is like creativity, and it's really solving these problems. However, when I pull out and I think about these symbols and really what they mean, you know, to me, it's like, it's about unity, you know? It's about different things sort of coming together is the Canadian story. I mean, at the heart of our flag, we have this beautiful maple leaf, right? That speaks to our connection to nature. It's one maple leaf. It's not like 3 maple leaves to represent anything. No, it's like, it's one, you know? So I think that is a subject matter that unites us, but also, you know, I think the torch has been passed now to companies like Lululemon and Arc'teryx and Herschel that are now the next gen of what represents Canada globally, and redefining sort of the Canadian stereotypes of lumberjacks and everything, of innovation and forward thinking.
Which is interesting.
What about you too? Yeah.
What's interesting when you talk about, you know, what makes a Canadian company. When you travel abroad and you see someone in with a Herschel bag or an Arc'teryx jacket or whatnot, many times those people don't know they're Canadian. And they may not understand that, and they maybe don't need to. And it is interesting to think about there was a time when a maple leaf in a logo was ubiquitous, and that meant it was Canadian. And we've moved away from that, and for you know, several reasons, of course. But you know, I think that adoption of something so ubiquitous, it sort of turns into like public domain, and it's less ownable. Therefore, is it less attractive for an organization to say this is our cornerstone of how we represent ourselves? You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
I know.
And we should save a little time to open up if there's any questions.
Yes, absolutely.
But the one last thing that we should probably touch on very quickly is AI's role in all this in the future. You know, of like how that is going to reshape what we do. You know, it's funny, we both work as designers, and there's this funny meme that our jobs are safe because it would require clients knowing what they want, you know, to be able to enter that, which is also kind of true in some ways. Like, I do feel we are tastemakers in a way. That's part of our job. But how is like AI integrated with your life, or how are you using it, and what's your thoughts of it for the future?
Well, I think, okay, when we say AI, I also think of it as like an overarching 30,000 feet on like democratization of graphic design and communication design. And I think that we have, you know, if you have a smartphone in your pocket, you probably have the means by downloading maybe 2 apps, and you could have yourself a logo if you wanted to. Or a very inexpensive service from someone who says they can do it. Is it good or not? That's subjective, but there is a democratization of it. I think that when we boil down to AI, and specifically generative AI, what I'm talking about are these, these platforms and services where you can type in keywords and you will get an image output based on a response. That's what we're talking about here. I use it in the studio as a tool to make mistakes faster. That's it. It's a really great way to see what isn't working, so that when you find something that might be closer to where you're going, and when I'm pointing at my head, I'm saying there's a vision, but that vision, ideally in graphic design, comes from a strategy. That's what we're always trying to achieve. And the same thing here with everything. You're trying to attach a vision or visual to a zeitgeist culturally and globally. So when I am able to achieve something, let's say it's your daughter found out today that you made a film. So I'm going to say photo of 5-year-old girl surprised, and I want to put a logo above that. I can very quickly then say, great, let's go and shoot this tomorrow. But the specifics for me and how I use it is it's not final output. That's the only rule. A human has to make it afterwards, but as like a sketch or whatnot, that's where I think it has legs to be used as a tool, not as a final result.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just another tool.
Right.
So for example, like I was, even in this film, it took me many years to research to find discoveries. I was over the holidays, I'm like, how can I use this to help me research, like if I were to do another one? And I was able to like write a manuscript for Design USA in like 2 weeks of just like prompting the machine.
Right.
But again, you got to have a point of view on it. It's
Right.
just another tool. Anyone can download Photoshop. But
I'm
that
sure the
doesn't
same thing happened when this thing came out.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
my mom worked in a studio where there was photo typesetters, there was metal typesetters, there was paste up artists, there were a myriad of people. How much people just smoked and drank because you'd be waiting for something back?
Yeah.
Like everyone is like looking fashionable and doing this and that because they're waiting for Giclées back from the office. Now it's just file save, done. Okay, ship it. You know.
Yeah.
So yes, if used as a tool with a place of vision, that could be correct. Yeah.
Should we open up for any questions?
Definitely. I'm definitely down
last
for
few
some
minutes?
questions. I know
Yeah.
we're over time.
Yep. Advice. Yeah, I got a few. So I
Sorry,
would
can
say,
we repeat the question for the?
what advice would you?
What
give
advice
for
would you give to
aspiring
designers? Excellent, cool. Yeah.
Honestly, it goes for designers or anything. Is just if you want to be great, you got to be ready to fail. Like that is so key. I mean, even through this film, I failed so many times. I shared a couple of them. There's others that are just so bad I couldn't share. But you gotta take it as a learning opportunity. I mean, I fail all the time. Even today, I did a podcast yesterday. I was talking about something like, oh man, I'm probably gonna regret that tomorrow. But again, like it's just about kind of constant evolution and refinement. And I would say that even in my high school art class, back when I was like 15, 16, I wasn't even the best designer in that class, but I acknowledged that I could be the hardest worker. And I think so much of our industry is just perspiration and hustle. You know, that is so key.
Yeah.
To just not give up. What would you say?
I had a professor at CAP give me great advice, which was, and it's frustrating to hear, but in my experience, it's either the first, whatever you're doing, drawing, you're making a logo, let's just say it's a logo. It's either the first drawing you've ever done, or it's the 100th, but it's never in between. And if it's the first one, you have to do 100 to know that that's the one. You can't stop at 12, you know? So yeah. Any other questions?
Great talk. Thank you. I had a question. You said you were like sparked by the Montreal logo.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of that identity through like time or budget. They adopted a lot of Munich branding from the summer prior. And I was just wondering, like, when you were working on your own identity for 2010, like, was it difficult to reject a lot of those modern ideas, or like how did it influence the identity for 2010?
Yeah, so actually Montreal only adopted the pictograms. That was the only thing that they licensed, and they modified a few things, but that was the one that they didn't. So when I was on the team for 2010, it was, it's also sort of turned into like, I think a little bit of an ego Olympic design, right? Because everyone wants to try to one-up everyone else. But for us, it was an opportunity to redefine the Canadian stereotype. You know, that's why there was like no red in the palette. Like that was a conscious decision, other than the red mittens, that was the only thing. So it was about showing a new way of Canada. And think about those Olympic design systems. They're about a time and a place. Like this work in the film is about timeless logo. How do you create timeless brands where the Olympic Games are very style driven? You know, it's like, what's the hottest thing in 2010? That's what it is for us. And you look back at some of the illustrations, I'm just like, oh man, like some of them are good, but some of them are like highly detailed, 3D dimensional, you know, that like,
Tupac at Coachella, I got you.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say that's what's different about those systems. But yeah, we were very conscious to present a new Canada and be reflective of this region too, and also authentically integrate Indigenous art too, you know, with not only 4 host First Nations, but all the other visual programs and aesthetics that came out of that as well. So.
So that just got me thinking about the Canada 150. Do you remember when this happened, when they put a call out and invited
Oh yeah.
anyone to submit something, and it was some kind of like $1,000 honorarium or something like that if the work got selected?
Yeah.
So as designers, how do you feel about you're providing opportunities, potentially exposure, but you're also underpaying people significantly. What's your read on something like that?
So that is touched on in the film a little bit as well through the designer that did the 100th anniversary of it. Again, so probably no one, you can probably close your mind and maybe remember what that logo is, if anyone can remember, but like you could never draw it. Ever. I couldn't even draw it. I've looked at that thing for like, I studied the thing. I couldn't, like there's so many shapes and it's angular and pointy. So to me, it's just a result of, the end result is a bad design when you do these like logo competitions or whatever. I'm all for competition, like I'm in, but I think it's not, yeah, it was a missed opportunity versus the 100th anniversary was just simply made up of triangles that anyone could draw or make or build in their garden. But that like makes design accessible and easy to use. Anyone can make it, right? So it's really more of just a missed opportunity than, I don't know, saying it's ethically wrong. Of course, I feel ethically wrong, but to me, it's more of a missed opportunity. What's your?
I just kind of think it goes back to my like drawing the Metallica logo on your textbook. Like when more people can feel involved in it because it is more approachable to draw and enjoy and reproduce, that's when I feel like a community can get around something rather than trying to get everyone to do one thing.
But yeah,
I won't even touch spec work. That's a whole different topic.
Yeah. Should we take one more? Yes.
How much of your process as a designer can you migrate and use as you're like making the film? Was there any crossover, or was it a totally new experience?
Yeah, I think a lot. Like, I'm grateful to have studied design because it's storytelling, right? It's storytelling through visual forms, and logos are one of the hardest things because, again, you're trying to distill complex ideas down into a single, recognizable, understandable shape, you know, that can also appear in an Instagram icon now that people understand. So luckily that narrative journey was there, but I mean, it was hard, man. Like learning how to cut and edit, that part was difficult. Designing for a design film too was also a whole other thing of we tried to take an aesthetic that felt like it could have been made in the 70s. So there's nothing flashy. Like as you saw when we're cutting through work, we're just like cutting through the work. We brought in like a really tight and structured grid, even the way we did the lower thirds. There's other documentation online you can check out about that. But so it helped, but it didn't, because once you get into like the moving images, I mean, there's 24 frames a second. This film's 76 minutes long. You know, that's like hundreds of thousands of frames, and everyone has to be accounted for. So yeah, that's kind of my take. Like it helped, but it was another beast, man. I thought I was in and out in like a year. 6 years later, that's what I know. But
any other questions?
We'll take one more. Yeah. You can watch it. It's on Apple TV. Very good one. I like it. Good plug. Thank you. You can check it out on Apple TV. You can buy it on Vimeo. Just look it up, Design Canada, designcanada.com. You can.
Do you still have merch available?
I do, but it's not for sale yet.
Okay,
So
okay.
I am in the process of creating a store. We'll get to that. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You did have, I know we're well over time. There is one little last section that's a really lovely feel-good section. It brings a tear to me every time. Before we say that, I would be remiss if I didn't make mention that you touched on this earlier about the difference between art funding and design funding, and that difference of attention or quality of work, or however you want to talk about that. And I think that I hope that the young individuals coming into either post-secondary or out of post-secondary through organizations like Artists for Kids can understand that you don't have to just do one thing. You will always be able to paint and draw and sculpt and create, and your practice of work and how you make a living can absolutely be working at an agency or on these wonderful projects and with these great people. And I think that we do get lumped into sort of the corporate or the business side, but I think that every single person who has chosen the path of being a graphic designer started drawing, and they started with pastels, and they started with Conte on construction paper, you name it. And I think that we lose sight of that, and we maybe not always draw as much as we should, but I hope that we can continue to foster that in both our young individuals and hopefully continued in ourselves as well too.
I love that. Yeah, and thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Today. The last clip I have, this is 1 minute clip, don't worry, we'll get out of here. This is Fritz Gottschalk, so he's from Switzerland. He was one of the first people that brought modernism to Canada and had a studio, Gottschalk and Ash, a Canadian business partner. And these are just his reflections on Canada.
Canadians and Swiss are similar in terms of behavior. Canadians are not as loud as some other people. The political setup is very similar to Switzerland, and they are real, true democracies. And you see that in the way people live and what they aspire to.
And thanks once again to our great speakers. Just before I let you all go, because I know you're probably ready to move your bodies, I just want to let you know that in the fall, we're going to be resuming programming for the remainder of the speaker series. We have Jeremy Shaw in conversation with Andrew Booth, Will Acton, James Harry, Lauren Brevner in conversation with Jen Jackson, and then finally wrapping up in November with Dr. Maya Geddes and Dr. Randy McIntosh, two neurologists. Visual art as a means of communicating thoughts about the brain. So we're really excited for the rest of the series, and thank you again to Tyler and Greg. Thank you so much.